So there I was, sitting in the most pretentious conference room this side of the Andromeda Galaxy, watching what could only be described as a 7-foot-tall cross between a velociraptor and a bodybuilder flex his way through what he probably thought was an intimidating speech. Vexstar, self-proclaimed predator king of the Catherian Empire, had scales that shifted from deep crimson to bone white depending on his mood, which apparently, right now, was homicidal peacock. His forearms gestured dramatically while his tail, adorned with what looked like ceremonial spikes, swept back and forth like he was conducting a symphony of doom. "Primitive species," he declared, his voice carrying that special blend of arrogance that only comes from never having been told no. "You stand before the apex of galactic evolution. For 10,000 years, the Catherian Empire has tested newcomers through the sacred trial of dominance." I took a sip of my coffee and wondered if the translator was working correctly, because this sounded like something out of a bad fantasy novel. "Your strongest warrior will face our greatest champion in single combat," Vexstar continued, apparently warming up to his favorite subject. "Victory means a place among the civilized races. Defeat means—" He paused for dramatic effect, claws extending with an audible click. "Well, let us say your species development program will be permanently discontinued." The collection of alien diplomats around the massive obsidian table shifted nervously. Ambassador Kelnara, who looked like someone had crossbred a flamingo with an anxiety disorder, was practically vibrating in her chair. The Zentorian representative had turned that particular shade of green that meant he was either terrified or needed to use whatever passed for a bathroom in his species. I set down my coffee cup with a gentle clink that somehow echoed in the sudden silence. "Sounds fair," I said. You could have heard a pin drop in a vacuum. Every eye, sensor, and optical organ in the room turned to stare at me like I had just volunteered to juggle live grenades. Vexstar blinked all 6 of his eyes in sequence, clearly not expecting such a casual response to his grand ultimatum. "You accept?" "Sure thing, Rex. When do you want to do this?" "It is Vexstar, not Rex," he snarled, his scales shifting to a darker shade of irritation. "Right, sorry. So what are we thinking, next Tuesday? I have a dentist appointment Thursday, but I could probably move it." The Predator King's jaw actually dropped, revealing rows of teeth that would have made a shark jealous. This was clearly not going according to his usual script. Ambassador Kelnara finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. "Captain Morrison, perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any hasty decisions that could result in the complete annihilation of your species." I turned to her with what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about it, Kuehl. We got this." Vexstar recovered his composure and straightened to his full, intimidating height. "Very well, human. 7 cycles from now, in the grand arena of Kythara Prime. Bring your mightiest warrior, for Krexos the Bone Crusher awaits. He has never known defeat." "Bone Crusher? Seriously?" I stood up and straightened my tie. "Well, Vex, this should be interesting. See you next week." As I walked out of the conference room, I could hear the alien diplomats erupting into panicked chittering, squawking, and what sounded like several different species praying to their respective deities. Behind me, Vexstar called out, "Human, you do realize that no species has ever survived the trial of dominance." I paused at the doorway and looked back over my shoulder. "Yeah, well, there's a first time for everything." The door slid shut behind me, cutting off the chaos inside. Time to make a phone call. News travels fast in the galactic community, especially when it involves what most species consider to be cosmic suicide. Within 6 hours, every major news network from here to the Magellanic Clouds was running the same headline. "Newly contacted human species accepts Catherian death challenge. Experts predict quick extinction." I was back on Earth, sitting in my favorite diner in downtown Denver, when Admiral Torres called. "Morrison, what the hell did you do out there?" His voice crackled through my communicator, barely containing what sounded like a mixture of panic and homicidal rage. "I accepted a challenge to single combat," I said, cutting into my pancakes. "Want me to send you the diplomatic summary?" "I've read the summary. Do you have any idea what you've just committed our entire species to?" "A fight." The line went quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear Torres counting to 10. "Jake, the Catherians are apex predators. They've been the dominant military force in this galaxy for 10,000 years. Their warriors are genetically engineered killing machines with cybernetic enhancements and combat experience that spans centuries." Sounds intimidating. They eat other sentient species for breakfast. Literally. Ambassador Kelnara sent us their dietary requirements. I took another bite of pancake. Well, that's just rude. Meanwhile, back at the diplomatic station, poor Kelnara was having what could charitably be called a complete nervous breakdown. The footage that made it back to Earth showed her pacing in circles, her colorful plumage literally falling out from stress, while she frantically tried to contact every ally humanity had made in their brief time on the galactic stage. "You must understand," she was saying to a collection of concerned alien ambassadors. "Humans appear to have no concept of self-preservation whatsoever. They actually seemed excited about the prospect of ritualized death combat." The Xantorian representative, now a permanent shade of nauseous green, was reviewing human cultural files. According to their entertainment media, they engage in something called extreme sports for recreational purposes. Perhaps they believe this is similar? "The aliens jump out of perfectly functional aircraft for fun," added the crystalline delegate from Proxima 7, their form flickering with what might have been confusion or horror. "Their psychological profiles suggest they may actually be incapable of recognizing danger." Back on Earth, every military installation was in full crisis mode. General Patterson had assembled the entire Joint Chiefs to discuss humanity's apparent death wish. "Options, people. What have we got?" "Project Hercules," suggested one general. "Our enhanced super soldiers. Still in beta testing. Half of them can't tie their shoes without accidentally punching through a wall." "What about the exoskeleton program?" "Great against conventional weapons, but these Catherians apparently have claws that can cut through battleship armor." "Cybernetic augmentation. We'd need at least 5 years to implement anything that might give us an edge." While Earth's military-industrial complex worked itself into a frenzy trying to build a warrior capable of facing a Cytherian champion, I was doing something far more practical. I was at the mall. "Can I help you find anything today?" asked the teenage clerk at the electronics store. "Yeah, I need a good tablet, something durable, with a long battery life and excellent processing power." "Are you looking for gaming, productivity, or—" "Educational software, lots of educational software." The kid perked up immediately. "Oh, for a child? We've got some great learning tablets. How old?" "For lifetime. The perfect age. Kids that age can really get into the advanced stuff. Math, science, engineering programs." I smiled. Exactly what I was thinking. By the time I finished shopping, the galactic news networks had moved from reporting on humanity's impending doom to taking bets on how quickly it would happen. The Catharian Empire had even started selling pay-per-view access to what they were calling the Great Human Extinction Event. Vexstar himself had given an interview, his scales practically glowing with anticipation. "It has been too long since we had a proper demonstration of Catherian superiority. This human species will serve as an excellent reminder to the galaxy of what happens when lesser beings overestimate themselves." Little did they know I had just finished making the most important purchase in human history, a 12-pack of juice boxes and a bag of trail mix. 7 days later, I walked into the grand arena of Kithara Prime with what the assembled galactic audience could only assume was either humanity's greatest secret weapon or definitive proof that our species had collectively lost its mind. Emma Rodriguez was 12 years old, 4 feet 6 inches tall, and currently more interested in the architectural engineering of the arena's retractable dome than the fact that 60,000 bloodthirsty aliens were screaming for her death. "Mr. Morrison," she said, not looking up from her tablet where she was taking notes, "did you know this whole structure is built on a series of counterbalanced fulcrums? It's actually really inefficient. They could have saved like 30% on materials costs with a simple geodesic design." "That's fascinating, Emma. Ready to meet some aliens?" "Oh, are we doing the thing now?" She looked up, adjusted her glasses, and grinned with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for science fair presentations. "This is so cool! I've never been to space before." The crowd had gone from bloodthirsty roaring to confused murmuring the moment we'd walked onto the arena floor. I could see alien species frantically checking their translation devices, convinced something had gone wrong. Vexstar, resplendent in ceremonial armor that probably cost more than most planets' annual budgets, descended from his royal box with all the dramatic flair he could muster. His 4 arms were spread wide, his tail held high, and his scales were cycling through what I was beginning to recognize as his maximum intimidation color scheme. He stopped about 10 feet away from us, looked down at Emma, then at me, then back at Emma. "Human," he said, his voice carrying across the arena through some kind of amplification system. "You mock the sacred traditions of the Catherian Empire." Emma raised her hand like she was in class. "Excuse me, Mr. King. Is it okay if I call you King? Anyway, I have a question about your sacred traditions. Vextar's scales shifted to a color I hadn't seen before. Something between purple and the kind of red that usually meant someone was about to explode. You dare speak to me, child? Well, yeah. I mean, you were talking to us, so it seemed like a conversation. That's how conversations work, right? She looked at me for confirmation. Did I miss something in the cultural briefing? The Predator King was apparently experiencing some kind of cognitive disconnect. Where is your warrior, human? Where is your champion? I gestured toward Emma, who had gone back to taking notes on her tablet. You're looking at her. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a photon drop. Then, slowly, like a wave building toward shore, the sound began. First confused chittering from the insectoid species, then outraged squawking from the avians, and finally a crescendo of what sounded like every possible way 60,000 different aliens could express the concept of what the actual hell. Vextar's voice, when it finally emerged, was the kind of low, dangerous growl that probably made grown Catharians wet themselves. You bring me a hatchling! She's actually in 7th grade, I corrected. Honor roll student, too. You insult the Empire. You insult our traditions. You insult the very concept of combat itself. Emma looked up from her tablet again. Actually, I think your combat traditions are pretty interesting. I was reading about them on the way here. Did you know you guys have only ever developed 17 basic tactical formations in 10,000 years? That's like statistically impossible, unless you're deliberately avoiding innovation. Vextar stared at her with all 6 eyes. What did you just say? Oh, I brought visual aids. Emma reached into her backpack, her actual school backpack, complete with patches from various science camps, and pulled out a folder. I made some charts. Want to see? The most feared warrior king in the galaxy looked at me with an expression that suggested he was questioning everything he thought he knew about the universe. Jake, he said, apparently forgetting all about titles and formality. What is happening right now? I shrugged. Am wanted to see some aliens. Figured this was a good opportunity. Emma had found what she was looking for in her folder. Oh, here we go. Mr. King, do you want to see my analysis of your military doctrine? I found some really interesting mathematical inconsistencies. In the royal box, I could see other alien dignitaries frantically consulting with each other. Ambassador Kelnara appeared to be having some kind of religious experience, though whether she was praying or having a breakdown was unclear. Vextar looked down at the 12-year-old human holding a folder full of hand-drawn charts and apparently experienced what philosophers might call an existential crisis. This is not how the trial of dominance works, he said weakly. Emma brightened. Oh, good. I was hoping we could try something new. Traditional combat is so boring, don't you think? What happened next will probably go down in galactic history as either the most anticlimactic or most devastating battle ever recorded, depending on how you define battle. Vextar, clearly struggling to maintain some semblance of his carefully orchestrated intimidation theater, gestured dramatically toward the arena's main entrance. Behold, Krexoth the Bone Crusher, champion of the Catharian Empire, slayer of 1,000 worlds, the undefeated. The gates rumbled open with a sound like thunder and out stepped what could only be described as death incarnate having a really bad day. Krexoth stood 8 feet tall, even with his shoulders hunched, his natural Catharian frame enhanced with enough cybernetic upgrades to stock a small spacecraft. His left arm had been completely replaced with what appeared to be a combination plasma cannon and industrial chainsaw. His right eye glowed with a red targeting laser that swept back and forth across the arena floor. Scars crisscrossed every visible inch of his scales, each one probably representing some conquered world or defeated champion. When he roared his challenge to the arena, the sound system actually short-circuited from the sheer volume. Emma looked up from her tablet, studied Krexoth for approximately 3 seconds and said, "Oh wow, that's a lot of unnecessary biomechanical modifications. Did anyone run a cost-benefit analysis on those upgrades?" Krexoth's targeting laser fixed on her with a whirring sound that suggested imminent violence. "The child asks about rules," Vextar announced, his voice echoing through the arena with recovered confidence. "Very well. The rules are simple. Combat continues until one participant yields, flees the arena, or dies. No weapons beyond natural abilities and approved enhancements. Victory goes to the last one standing." Emma raised her hand again. "Question about the approved enhancements. Are those standardized across all participants, or is there some kind of regulatory body that certifies combat modifications? Because I'm seeing some serious safety violations just from here." Krexoth took a step forward, his mechanical foot leaving a small crater in the arena floor. Little flesh thing speaks too much. Krexoth will make the speaking stop. Oh, you talk, that's great. Emma beamed at him like he'd just solved a particularly clever math problem. I was wondering about your tactical doctrine. See, I was reading about Kytherian combat methodology on the trip here, and I noticed something really interesting. She flipped open her folder and pulled out what appeared to be a hand-drawn chart, covered in colorful markers and what looked suspiciously like glitter glue. So, according to your military histories, Kytherian warriors favor what you call the overwhelming force paradigm, right? Maximum aggression, direct assault, crush your enemies through superior physical capabilities? Krexo paused mid-intimidating advance, apparently confused by the sudden shift to academic discussion. Your documentation says this approach has never failed in 10,000 years of warfare, Emma continued, completely oblivious to the fact that she was lecturing a cybernetic killing machine. But here's the thing. That's mathematically impossible. Vextar's scales shifted to a new color, one that I was pretty sure meant confused homicidal rage. What do you mean, impossible? He demanded. Emma lit up like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to ask that question. Well, see, any combat doctrine that claims 100% success rate over that long a period has to be either lying about the numbers or they've never actually fought anyone competent. She turned to her next chart, which appeared to be a probability distribution drawn in purple crayon. Basic game theory tells us that in any repeated strategic interaction, which is what warfare is, really, optimal strategies evolve over time. If your opponents are learning and adapting, and you're not, then your success rate should decrease exponentially. Krexoth looked at Vextar. Vextar looked at Krexoth. Neither of them seemed to have a response to being lectured on game theory by a 7th grader. But your success rate hasn't decreased, Emma continued, pulling out another chart. Which means either you've been incredibly lucky for 10 millennia, the odds of which are approximately 1 in 10 to the 47th power, or you've been deliberately choosing opponents who can't adapt. The arena had gone completely silent. 60,000 aliens were watching a 12-year-old human deconstruct the entire foundation of Kytherian military supremacy using what appeared to be a middle school math presentation. So either you're the unluckiest empire in galactic history, or you're basically just cosmic bullies who only pick fights you know you can win. Emma looked up from her charts with the kind of innocent smile that could probably stop wars. Which one is it? Krexoth's targeting laser had stopped moving. He was just standing there, staring at Emma like she'd grown a second head. This is not combat, Vextar said weakly. Oh, but it is, Emma said brightly. It's just intellectual combat instead of physical combat, and honestly, this is way more interesting than just hitting each other until someone falls down. She flipped to another chart, this one covered in equations that would have made a statistics professor weep with joy. Want to see my analysis of your energy expenditure ratios? Because I have some thoughts about your cybernetic enhancement protocols that I think you're really going to want to hear. In the royal box, Ambassador Kulnara had given up on panic and moved straight to what looked like religious ecstasy. Other alien dignitaries were frantically taking notes, probably realizing they were witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of warfare. Krexoth the Bone Crusher, Slayer of 1,000 Worlds, the Undefeated, slowly sat down on the arena floor and put his head in his hands. I think we broke your champion, I mentioned to Vextar. She has not even finished explaining, he replied in a voice that suggested his entire worldview was currently undergoing rapid disassembly. Emma, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just caused the most feared warrior in the galaxy to have what appeared to be a nervous breakdown, pulled out her next chart with all the enthusiasm of a kid showing off her science project. Okay, so now that we've established the statistical impossibility of your success rate, let's talk about resource allocation inefficiencies. She held up a chart that looked like it had been drawn with every colored pencil in existence. Mr. Krexoth, can I ask you about your cybernetic modifications? Krexoth looked up from his hands with the expression of someone who had just realized everything he believed about reality might be wrong. What? What about them? Well, that plasma cannon arm replacement must have cost, what, maybe 50 million credits? And the targeting system in your eye, probably another 20 million? Plus the reinforced skeletal structure, enhanced musculature, neural interface systems. Emma was counting on her fingers like she was adding up grocery expenses. I'm estimating somewhere around 300 million credits total, not including maintenance and ammunition costs. Emma sighed. That is approximately correct, Krexoth admitted, apparently too stunned to maintain his intimidating persona. Wait, so here's my question. Emma flipped to a new page, covered in what appeared to be economic projections written in sparkly gel pen. For the same 300 million credits, you could have built approximately 15,000 remote combat drones, each with the same firepower as your plasma cannon, plus full AI tactical coordination, redundant systems, and zero risk to organic personnel. The arena was so quiet you could have heard a quark decay. But instead, Emma continued cheerfully, you took one perfectly good warrior and turned him into a very expensive, very vulnerable single point of failure. From a strategic standpoint, that's like, well, it's like using a sports car as a battering ram. Sure, it might work once, but you've wasted a really expensive sports car when a regular battering ram would have been cheaper and more effective. Vexstar's scales had shifted to a color I was pretty sure didn't exist in nature. You are saying our greatest warrior is inefficient? Oh, he's not inefficient as a warrior, Emma said quickly, apparently not wanting to hurt Capsaw's feelings. He's super intimidating, and I bet he's really good at fighting, but as an investment strategy, it's basically the economic equivalent of buying lottery tickets with your retirement fund. She pulled out another chart, this one showing what appeared to be comparative analysis graphs. See, the thing about cybernetic enhancement is that it follows the law of diminishing returns. Each modification gives you less additional capability per credit spent than the last one. Meanwhile, your opponents are developing countermeasures specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses created by your modifications. Kreksoth was staring at his plasma cannon arm like he was seeing it for the first time. Weaknesses? Oh yeah, tons of them. Like, that targeting laser is super cool, but it also broadcasts your exact aim point to anyone with basic optical sensors. And the plasma cannon probably takes, 3 seconds to charge between shots? Plus it generates enough heat signature to be visible from orbit. Emma was getting more animated as she warmed to her subject. Any competent opponent would just use rapid movement and thermal camouflage to make your expensive targeting system completely useless. But I am undefeated, Kreksoth said weakly. Well, yeah, because you've been fighting people who don't understand basic tactical adaptation. Emma's tone was gentle, like she was explaining to a younger child why their crayon drawing of a rocket wouldn't actually reach the moon. It's like being the chess champion of a planet where nobody knows how chess works. You're not actually good at chess, you just know more rules than everyone else. In the royal box, I could see alien ambassadors frantically updating their military assessments of humanity. Several species appeared to be having emergency conferences, probably realizing that if a 12-year-old human could casually dismantle Catherian doctrine, what could their actual military strategists do? Vexstar himself looked like he was experiencing the kind of existential crisis usually reserved for philosophy majors and people who'd just discovered their entire religion was based on a mistranslation. You are saying, he began slowly, that our 10,000 years of military dominance is based on, what did you call it, cosmic bullying? Not intentionally, Emma said brightly. I think you guys just got really good at one specific type of warfare and then never adapted when conditions changed. It's like, okay, imagine you're really good at using a hammer, so you start thinking everything is a nail. Eventually you forget that screws exist, and when someone shows up with a screwdriver, you don't know what to do. She flipped to what appeared to be her final chart, this one covered in equations that looked like they belonged in a graduate-level physics textbook. The real problem is that your entire military philosophy is based on individual superiority rather than systemic adaptation. You're trying to build the perfect warrior, instead of building the perfect system. But any individual, no matter how enhanced, is still vulnerable to coordinated tactics, asymmetric warfare, and basic statistical probability. Anna looked up at Kreksoth with genuine curiosity. Like, what happens if you fight 10 opponents at once? Or 100? Your targeting system can only lock onto one target at a time. Your plasma cannon has a limited rate of fire, and your enhanced reflexes are still bound by the laws of physics. At some point, the numbers game beats individual capability every time. Kreksoth slowly stood up, looked at his plasma cannon arm, then at his cybernetic enhancements, then at the 12-year-old human who had just mathematically proven that his entire existence was essentially an expensive mistake. He began, then stopped. I need to reconsider some things. That's great, Emma beamed at him. Self-reflection is super important for personal growth. Hey, do you want to see my projections for optimal resource allocation in a post-scarcity military economy? I think you'd find the applications really interesting. Vexstar, the predator king of the Catherian Empire, the most feared ruler in the galaxy, slowly sank to his knees on the arena floor. Human child, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. What have you done to us? Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. I think I might have accidentally invented a new type of warfare. Is that bad? Mr. Morrison said I wasn't supposed to start any international incidents. I patted her on the shoulder. I think we're past worrying about international incidents, kiddo. Oh, good, she said, pulling out one more folder, because I also have some thoughts about your economic system that I think might interest you. What followed could only be described as the most polite conquest in galactic history. Vextar, still on his knees in the middle of his own arena, looked up at Emma with the expression of someone who had just discovered that everything he thought he knew about mathematics was actually just elaborate finger painting. Human child, he said, his voice carrying across the silent arena through speakers that were probably designed to broadcast victory roars rather than existential surrender. We, the Catherian Empire, yields. The crowd erupted into chaos. 60,000 aliens, representing hundreds of species, began chittering, squawking, roaring, and producing sounds that probably didn't have equivalents in any human language. Most of them sounded confused, several sounded terrified, and at least a few sounded like they were placing very large bets on future human interactions. Emma looked around at the noise with mild concern. Did I do something wrong? Mr. Morrison, are they upset about something? No, kiddo, I think they're just processing some new information about how the universe works. Vextar struggled to his feet, his scales cycling through colors that suggested he was experiencing every possible emotion simultaneously. Human child, Emma, what would you require of us? What are your terms for our surrender? Emma brightened considerably. Oh, you don't have to surrender. That seems kind of dramatic. But I do have some suggestions, if you're interested. She pulled out what appeared to be a to-do list written on notebook paper with little star stickers next to each item. First, could you maybe upgrade your Starship Wi-Fi? I was trying to download some reference materials on the way here and your bandwidth is really limited. It took like 20 minutes just to load a basic physics textbook. Krexoth, who had been quietly examining his cybernetic modifications with what appeared to be dawning horror, looked up. You want us to improve our internet connection? Well, yeah. How are you supposed to stay current with technological developments if your information infrastructure is stuck in the Stone Age? Oh, and speaking of technological development, you should probably invest in some better educational systems. Your military academies are teaching tactics that were obsolete before my grandparents were born. Vextar was taking notes. The Predator King of the Catherian Empire was actually taking notes on the demands of a 12-year-old human. What else? He asked weakly. Emma consulted her list. Oh, and you should probably stop conquering smaller civilizations. It's not very nice, and honestly, it's preventing you from developing more sophisticated diplomatic and economic strategies. Plus, it's giving you a really bad reputation, which is going to hurt your trade relationships in the long run. Stop conquering, Vextar repeated, like she'd just suggested he stop breathing. Right. See, the thing about conquest-based expansion is that it's actually a really inefficient way to acquire resources. You spend enormous amounts of energy on military operations, you create hostile populations that require constant management, and you miss out on all the benefits of voluntary cooperation. Emma was getting animated again, clearly excited to share more of her analysis. Peaceful trade relationships generate way more long-term value with fraction of the overhead costs. She flipped to another page. I ran some preliminary calculations based on your current military expenditures, and if you converted just 50% of your conquest budget into infrastructure development and educational investment, you could probably double your economic output within a generation. Ambassador Kelnara, who had been silent throughout Emma's systematic demolition of galactic power structures, finally found her voice. Are you suggesting that the Catherian Empire become peaceful? Well, not necessarily peaceful, Emma said thoughtfully. More like strategically cooperative. You can still have a strong military for defensive purposes and emergency response, but using it primarily for aggressive expansion is just bad resource management. Krexoth slowly began removing his cybernetic targeting system. If we are not conquering, what am I supposed to do? Emma's face lit up. Oh, that's easy. You could be a really great engineering consultant. I bet with your experience in cybernetic integration, you could help develop much more efficient enhancement systems. Maybe something modular that could be adapted for different purposes instead of being locked into a single combat configuration. You want me to become a consultant? Sure, or a teacher, or a researcher, or anything really. The point is, you have all this experience and knowledge that could be really useful if it wasn't just focused on fighting people. In the royal box, I could see alien dignitaries frantically updating what were probably their entire strategic assessments of human capabilities. Several species appeared to be drafting new diplomatic protocols, and at least one delegation looked like they were preparing immediate surrender documents just in case. Vextar looked around his arena, at his champion who was now enthusiastically discussing career alternatives with a human child, at the crowd of aliens who were witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of galactic politics, and finally back at Emma. Human child, Emma, would you be willing to serve as an advisor to the Kytherian Empire? Emma considered this seriously. That sounds really interesting, but I'd have to check with my mom first, and I can't miss too much school. Oh, and you definitely need to fix that Wi-Fi situation first. I can't work effectively without proper internet access. We will upgrade our entire communications infrastructure immediately, Vextar said with the kind of desperate enthusiasm usually reserved for deathbed conversions. Great. Oh, and one more thing. Emma consulted her list again. Could you maybe apologize to all those civilizations you conquered? I think it would go a long way toward improving your diplomatic relationships. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a 12-year-old human with a folder full of hand-drawn charts accidentally became the most influential strategic advisor in galactic history. The Kytherian Empire's formal apology tour lasted 6 months and resulted in the largest voluntary economic cooperation agreement the galaxy had ever seen. Krexoth the Bone Crusher retired from combat and became Krexoth the Systems Integration Specialist, eventually earning a doctorate in applied cybernetics from the University of New Geneva. Vextar himself underwent what historians would later call the most dramatic philosophical transformation since the invention of logic, and the Kytherian Empire became the galaxy's leading advocates for peaceful conflict resolution. As for Emma, she finished 7th grade with perfect attendance, won the regional science fair with a project on optimizing resource allocation in post-scarcity civilizations, and somehow managed to complete all of this while serving as part-time strategic advisor to 3 different galactic governments. And me? Well, I got a promotion, and the satisfaction of knowing that humanity had just become the most feared species in the galaxy, not because we could build better weapons, but because we had something far more terrifying than any military force: mathematically gifted children, with no filter and unlimited access to educational software. The universe, it turned out, was not prepared for that level of analytical devastation, delivered with a smile and a juice box.